In part 1 of this series, we used the Create Block Theme plugin to scaffold our theme and quickly threw together some templates to demonstrate the process. In this video, we're going to throw all that out the window and start again from scratch, so you understand what's happening step by step. If you haven't watched part 1, I suggest taking a look in the description below where I'll put a link to the playlist for this series. Before I switch over to my computer, I also want to address some comments that I received. Some people pointed out that it sounds like I'm sending mixed messages about whether I like block themes and blocks, and whether they're a good thing. That's a fair point, and honestly, I'm conflicted on them myself. I truly like the concept of blocks and block themes, but I'm extremely frustrated with the way WordPress is handling the move to them. Not only is it disjointed and piecemeal, but it's also overly complicated for the average web designer. I can completely understand why most designers choose to use page builders over the block editor. The core WordPress blocks are lacking so much functionality, and third-party block sets come with their own issues. The argument that we should be building our own blocks is great, except that creating them by hand requires a level of skill that most designers don't have, and it takes so much time that they're unprofitable. I'll be honest here. If it wasn't for Pinegrow, which I'll touch on in part 6, I would not be spending hours creating custom blocks for each of my projects. If you want to hear more of my rambling about WordPress and the Gutenberg project, you can check out the video called WordPress is for Everyone, Just Not for Us. I'll drop a link to that in the description. Also, if you want to learn more about Pinegrow, I have plenty of videos about it and a playlist on my channel. Now, let's get to the good stuff. I'm going to start here with a brand new development site running on local WP. For these next lessons, I strongly recommend using a local website since you'll be doing a lot of file editing. I've made some basic configuration changes to the site and added some test data, but I haven't done anything else. In fact, if you check out my recent video about WP CLI, you'll see step-by-step how I configured this site, and you can download the commands to run yourself so you can have this up and running in under 5 minutes. We'll start off by taking a look here under Appearance and Themes, and you'll see that we just have the 2024 theme installed. So the first thing that we need to do is create a directory for our brand new theme that we're making. For that, I'm going to switch over to VS Code, and this is where we're going to be doing most of our code editing. I've got my themes folder open in here, and now I'm just going to create a new one, and we're going to call this BTFS demo. Now, to make a new theme, you really only need 2 files. You need a style.css and an index.html file. So let's start off by creating that style.css. In our style.css, we need a few basic things. And if you take a look at the WordPress developer handbook, you'll be able to find that pretty quickly. You can come down here and see an example style.css, and then they have an explanation of what the fields are and which ones are required. Now, all these aren't necessarily required for the theme itself, but they are all required if you want to put this into the theme repository. So let me just paste all this in here and then walk you through it. We start off with a theme name, that's pretty self-explanatory. The author, that's me. An author URI, that's a URL where someone can go to find information about the person who created it. Description of the theme, version, requires at least, this is saying that it's going to require at least WordPress version 6.4, and I've tested it up to WordPress version 6.4. This requires PHP version 8.1. It's got some tags. This one isn't necessary, but it is very helpful. And a text domain, this is going to be good for internationalization, and then you need a license. The only other file that we need here is that index.html, and that actually needs to be in a subdirectory called templates. So let's create that subdirectory, and in there we will create index.html, and this doesn't need anything at all in it. Now when we switch back to WordPress and refresh our themes page, you'll see we have our BTFS demo theme. We can activate this, and if we look at it on the front end, you get a whole lot of nothing because it's an empty index template. This is a whole lot different than what we saw in the previous demo where we used the Create Block Themes plugin and it created a template for us for index. This, we have absolutely nothing. We're starting completely from scratch. So let's go ahead and hit this Edit Site button so that we can start building out our theme. This brings us into the site editor, and you can see that we have the index template loaded. You'll notice that there's not much in here. For navigation, we just have the social menu. That's part of the stuff that we imported. We don't have any styles in here. We've got the pages that we imported. All we have is that blank index template, and we don't have any patterns imported. So let's come into our templates, index template, and edit that thing. If you take a look at what a general page is going to look like, you're going to find a header section, the body of the page, and a footer section. So this is sort of the same thing that we're going to create here inside of our index template. Let's start off by creating the header and the footer, and then for that index template, we'll work on the content part. So here we are back inside of the site editor, and I've got my index template loaded up, and now I want to create our header section. So I'm going to open up our block inserter, and I'll choose under blocks. I scroll down, we've got our theme related blocks, and here we've got a few options. We can select a template part, which is just a general template part, a header template part, which is a named one, or a footer template part, which is a named one. Here I'm going to select header. If I wanted to, I could choose to use one of the existing patterns, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start blank, and we're going to name this general header. So I mentioned before that when we create sections like this, we're going to have a group block followed by either a row or a stack block. Once we're finished creating this header section, I'll show you what all that means to the code. So we're going to come in and we will click on the add block button in here and create our group. And I want to make this just a general group block. You know what? I'm going to open up the list view so that we can see what's happening. In here in this group block, I'm going to add a row. And then in that row, I want a logo and I want a navigation menu. So the logo, I want to wrap that in another div. And I call that a div because I'm just thinking in terms of HTML. So I'm going to come in here and let's add another row. And in there, we can add our site logo. And here for our site logo, we can say add media. And we can choose our site logo that I imported. And that's a general logo Ipsum logo. What I want to do though, is I want to uncheck this use a site icon. So we're going to uncheck that because I want a different icon than my logo for the site icon. So here I need to come down and click on this little link here that says site icon settings. Now this is one of those weird places inside of the block editor and block themes and FSE, they want all your site settings to be done contextually, which is kind of strange because it means that you're jumping all over the place to make different settings. In classic themes, we went to the customizer for all the site-wide stuff. And now here is where it's really disjointed because we've got some things that we're doing contextually, and let me save this before I forget. And then other things where you'll see when I click this, it takes us over to the customizer. So, all right, here we are in the customizer. I'm going to select that site icon and we will say crop image and it's added it as a site icon. I will hit publish, go back out of here, then back into our site editor, open up that template again, and then open this back up. So now you can see we have our group with the row. That's going to hold another row with the site logo. That site logo can link to the homepage, and it does not work as the site icon anymore. If you want to make that logo bigger, which everyone does, you can make it as big as you want. Now let's go ahead and add the navigation block. So let's collapse this row here, and we'll come back to the row above it, and we're going to add another block. Going to make this our navigation block, and you'll see that it's already pulled one of the menus that was imported along with our theme test data. I'm not going to use this one. Instead, I'm going to click on these three dots and say create new menu. And now it's got a blank menu. I'm going to hit the add block button. And if I wanted to add individual pages, I could do that. Or if I want to add everything, I can hit page list. And that's what I'll do here. Now I want to rename this menu. Before, in the classic way, you would go into the menu section, you would give it a name and do whatever you want. Here, again, everything's contextual. So I need to come into settings and advanced to see that menu name. And I can rename it from header navigation to main navigation. Hit save, save that again. And there we have it. We've got a very, very basic header. So it's a group with a row and another row. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and show you what this looks like on the front end. I was going to add some class names to it just so that you could see what it all was, but it doesn't really matter for these purposes. So let's click on this little dude here and say view site. Now you'll notice here our justification is a little bit off, so let's go ahead and correct that here. I generally want my logo to be all the way on the left and my navigation to be all the way on the right. So let's just switch back to our site editor. And for that, we're going to choose navigation, and I want to change the justification for that to go to justify items right. But that's not going to quite do everything we want for us because, let's save this, and I'm going to show you what's going on. I come back here and refresh. You see it still hasn't done anything. If I take a look at it inside the inspector, we've got the logo there and our navigation there, but the div that holds them doesn't really go all the way across. So what we want to do is come back into the site editor, and here's our div that holds them. And here, instead of justify left, I want to say space between items. I'll save that, come back here and refresh. And now you can see that we've added some space between. So what does all this mean in terms of page markup? Let me show you. Starting from the top, we've got our header, and it automatically created that header element right there. If we go to advanced, we can see that it's already made this as a header HTML element. So that's good. It'll do that for the header and the footer. Anything else, if we want to set it as something different, we can come in here and we can select that for our general template parts. So inside that header, we have our div, and this is our group block. Inside that div, we have the row. So I mentioned before, we've got our group and our row. So the group is just going to be a general div. The row is going to be the inner container, and this is what's going to constrain it to certain widths. We'll get to that in a little bit. Inside of that row, we have our next row, and this is the one that holds the image for our site logo. And in that, we've got more divs, a little bit of divception there for our site logo. It's not terrible, but yes, there is a little bit of divception going on. And you'll notice that the logo is wrapped inside of an anchor. Coming back out of that just a little bit, and we're going to come back here so that we can see the other thing on this level. We have our image, and then we have our navigation menu. So this is a nav element, which is exactly how we want it. And then inside that nav element, we've got the button. So this is going to be for when we make this a mobile menu. We've got the button menu that shows. And then we have the navigation. Coming in here, we've got a few wrapper divs. We've got a button again. The SVGs for the drop downs. And for the items, they are unordered list and list items, just like a good menu should be. Now, I've done another video where I took a look at the accessibility for different menus on different systems. When it comes to accessibility, the built-in WordPress nav menu actually isn't terrible. It's pretty good. I have a lot of complaints about the block nav menu. It's not nearly as customizable or as flexible as I want it to be. But in terms of accessibility, I really can't say much bad about it. So that really wraps up what I want to do at this point for the header. We're going to come back and do a little bit more styling later on, but I've got the elements where I want them, and I have things generally in the places where I want them. The next thing I want to do is get started on the footer, but before I do that, I want to actually create another group in between there, just that we've got a placeholder. So we'll come in here and we'll say group, add a group, and in there we'll add a row. And in that, I just want a paragraph to say placeholder. And that way I don't get confused when I look at it. All right, so now we can come back in and we're going to add a footer. So I can come back to blocks. And under theme, we've got our general template part again. You can see that header has now been renamed to general header since that's what we named it. And then we have a footer block here. So we're going to add footer. And we're going to start blank. I'm going to call that general footer. And it looks like that went into the wrong place because Gutenberg is Gutenberg. So I'm going to drag that back out of here and move it into the right place. There we go. Now inside this footer, I want a few different elements. I want to have the site title, and I want to have a paragraph that has some text in there. It can be credits, it can be copyright, anything like that. I also want social icons, and I want a search bar. So I can do that two different ways. I can either do that as rows or as columns. So I'm going to start off again by creating a group block to hold everything. And that's going to be general group. And then inside of that, I do want to create these as rows because I want them to be a little bit more responsive. So we're just going to come in, we're going to say add block and say row. And that's going to create one row, and that'll have my title and my search. And then we'll do another row after that for my paragraph and social icons. So we've got a row there, and we'll come back in here and do another row. Awesome. So on this first row here, we're going to have our site title. So it adds that there. And then next to that, we're going to add our search. On the bottom row, I'm just going to do a regular paragraph. And we'll say this amazing site created by me. And we'll do social icons. And here inside these social icons, we'll do one for Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it these days. And again, because everything is contextual, putting that there. And then we will do one more for LinkedIn. All right, and then I want to take this paragraph, and what I want to do here is I want to make sure that the rows go all the way across. So this first row looks pretty good. I'm going to do, though, a space between, and then the second row also space between. And then just looking at it, it looks really funny what's happening with the spacing. So let's save this, and we'll take a look on the front end at what's happening. Okay, and that actually looks all right here on the front end. You know, inside the block editor, some things just sometimes look funny because block editor actually has a separate set of styles. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. I don't want to get too much into styling now. I'm really concerned more about structure and getting the pieces in place so that we can add styles and things like that on later. Where it makes sense though, and where we can do some very, very quick and easy styling, I am going ahead and doing that here. So coming back to the block editor, and I'm not going to mess around with the styling of the search. You know, again, this is all stuff that we can take care of later on as we get more into styling the theme. And frankly, everyone's going to have their own way that they want to style this thing. And each client's going to want it styled a little bit differently as well. So what we're looking to create here is just a general theme that can be used over and over again as a starter boilerplate theme. So that gives us our general header, a general footer, and you saw we've got that placeholder content in the middle there. Now the last thing we want to create here in the index template is going to be a query loop. And what that would do is on things like a blog page or an archive page or a search page, it would show us those search results along with the title of the posts that are relevant, along with the excerpt and maybe an image. And on a page or a post, it would show the content of it. Here's where we run into a little bit of problem with block themes though. In a block theme, we can't have conditionals on the blocks the way that we can inside of a PHP template. So normally, like I said, we would have it so that it would show different types of content based on what type of page you're on. But here, we really need to choose what we're doing. So the way that I'm going to create this is I'm going to create it as a blog index page. So I've got that group that we had already created. And here I want to come into advanced and change this element from a div. And I want to make that main, because this is going to be the meat of the page. So then we'll have a header element, main element, and a footer element. Again, we want to make sure on every page, I guess every template here, that we have that main element. That's just an important semantically thing. And inside of that group, we've got our row that we had already created, and then we have our paragraph. I'm going to delete this paragraph since we don't need it anymore. But inside this row, what I want to do is create a query loop block. And just like all the other places where we could choose from one of the patterns or create our own, I'm going to create our own. So here we will start blank. And I'm just going to say title and excerpt because I know these are the things that I definitely want. So we can expand this query loop and we can see that we've got the post template. This is the stuff that gets repeated for every single post. And we can see that it's going to repeat a title and an excerpt. Then we have our pagination section here. It's got our previous button, the page numbers, and then the next button. And then under that, this is what's going to show if there are no results. And in here, I'm just going to say something like, sorry, nothing found with a nice typo. But this post template, you know what? Let's go ahead and save this and just take a look at what it looks like. Come in here to the front page. And boom. So we can see that it's working. We can see that the titles for the different things, as well as the previous and next pages, and they're all working. They don't look great, but they work. If we take a look at the blog page, we can see that as well. But if we click into one of these things, we actually can't click because they're not links right now. But if we look at a page, again, it's showing us the index because we don't have anything different for pages and posts. So let's come back into this and we're going to just finish designing this post template. So for this post template, I want it to be 2 columns. I want to have an image on the left-hand column, and then I want to have title and excerpt on the right, and I want to make sure that the title is linked. So for a title, I'm just going to come in here and say make title a link. And excerpt, we can leave that as it is, but let's close those up here. I want to come in and I want to create some columns. So we'll do that. And I'm going to stick these columns inside the post template. And I want to do 6633. And my title and excerpt, I want in the right-hand column. And in the left-hand column, I want to put my featured image. There we go, featured image. And for that image, I want to make sure that that is aligned center. I don't want any filters on there. And we will save and preview. And it looks like I messed up my column sizes, so let's just come back to that. This, I did not want that one 66, I wanted that one 33.33. And this was the one that I wanted 66. If you're wondering why it's showing us stacked in here, it's because I've got this thing wide and I also have the page zoomed out a little, or zoomed in a little bit. So just so that you can see it on the video here, I wanted to zoom it in, but I guess 125, I guess that'll show it without changing the breakpoint. So we'll leave it at 125. All right, so there we go. Now we can kind of see what's happening a little bit better. And on the front end, when I refresh, these do not have featured images, so we're not seeing anything in there. But we can at least start to see that our posts are getting linked. And when we click on them, we can see that they're going to the right places. They're just not showing anything because we don't have a template to show them. Not a big fan of what's going on down here with the pagination. So if I really wanted to, I could come into our pagination and I could say, instead of justify left, again, I could do space between, and that would make it look a tiny bit prettier. On the first page, there we go, there we go. On subsequent pages, we get previous page all the way on the left, then the numbers in the middle, and then all the way on the right, we've got our next page. Once we start constraining the width of these pages, it'll all start to come together a little bit more than it is right now. So that takes care of our index template. We've got our header created, we've got the footer created, and we have our blog list created. Since we haven't done this lately, we're going to come back to the site editor. And in here, you can now see these three little dots under actions, and it says clear customizations. And what this means is that if you remember correctly, we created that blank HTML file, and that's the template file that lives in our theme package. However, all these changes that we made only live in the database. So in a later lesson, we'll show you how to package and distribute these themes. But for now, understand that we created this blank template, and all the work that we've been doing only lives in the database. We'll come back to our site editor, and you can see that we now have our navigation. We've got that social menu that was there before that was imported, as well as our new main navigation. And under patterns, we've got our general header here and our general footer there. If we wanted to create multiple headers or footers, we could very easily do that and then assign those headers and footers to different post templates. We could also come straight into here, into this patterns section, and open one of these guys up and modify it directly. And then it would get applied to any of those places where we've used this pattern. So right now, these patterns are for header and footer are called template parts. It's a little bit confusing. Template parts is the name that's been around for a long time, since the classic themes. And WordPress is trying to get away from using template parts, and they're trying to call everything a pattern. So they're going to have synced patterns, unsynced patterns, and partially synced patterns. These things that we're creating here, like header and footer, these are synced patterns. And what that means is that they are just referenced. We create them once, we reference them in a lot of different places. So if they get changed in any of those places, they get changed back at the source, and they reflect everywhere. An unsynced pattern is basically like a copy. And so that's saying that we can create something and just kind of rubber stamp copy it. And if it gets changed in the source, it won't get reflected anywhere else. It's just that copy. And then a partially synced pattern, which is coming in WordPress 6.5, is going to be a little bit of a combination of both. It's going to let us choose what to sync and what not to sync. And that will let us do some really great things, like having a design that doesn't change. And we can apply that in multiple places and then edit just the content for those patterns. But for right now, just understand that template parts and patterns are this weird little thing where they're confusing all the terminology. It's also kind of interesting. You can come down here and you've got these two things that say manage all my patterns and manage template parts. If I say manage all my patterns, check this out. It comes back to the classic admin dashboard. And this is where you can import patterns and add new patterns and do stuff like that. Not sure why they haven't added that to the site editor yet, but you'd think they would. But if we come into manage template parts, which is more of a legacy term, it's here inside the site editor. And we can manage those template parts inside the site editor. So I'm not sure what's happening there. This is one of those frustrating things about the Gutenberg project. And it seems like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. Now we're going to come back to our good friend, the WP template hierarchy. So we created our index template. This is the fallback template for anything at all. And so what that means is that all of the archives right now are going to show that index template. Our home, which would be the blog index page, that would also show the index template. Even the 404 page and the search pages would show our index template. However, a lot of these things, we want to have different components on there. So we're going to create separate templates for them in a little bit. But the next thing I want to do is to create a page template for our general pages. So we'll come back here to the site editor and come into our templates, and we will create a new template for the pages. So we'll say add new template, pages, all items. Not going to bother with a pattern. And here we will click on the block inserter. We will add a general header. We'll add a general footer. And then we're going to add a group block for the content. And inside that group block, we're going to add a row. And inside that row, we're going to add page content. And I'm going to pop this guy open again and rearrange it so that it all makes sense. And here we'll save. And we can preview this on the front end. And there we go. This is a page to test this theme's handling of the front page template. So yeah, since the front page is a normal page, we can see that this content is loading. We've got our header, we've got the page content, and we've got the footer. If I come over here to blog page, it loads up the index template now. I noticed that we didn't add a title in there, so I'm going to come back in here to our group and we're going to add another row. And I will add that right above. And inside this row, we're going to add the title. There we go. And I want to make this left aligned. And I want to make this an H1. And here, I want that to be justified left. I'm going to save that and we'll find out why it's showing up centered in just a second after I preview this. And yeah, again, I think we're looking at Gutenberg styles just being funny. Because on the front end, which is where I care about, it's showing up left aligned, not in the center like that. We're also not going to worry about spacing at this point or anything like that. We'll get to that in the next lesson a little bit. So that was that for our page template. The next thing that I want to work on is our post template, which is going to be a lot like our page template, except we're also going to put on a little bit of metadata, and we're going to add a previous post and next post navigation in there. So let's come back. And before I forget, we're going to come back into that page template because I made a big mistake. When we created our group, I never set this to be the main element. So I'm just going to come in and change that to say main. There we go. Now we can come back in and do templates, add, and we'll do a single post template. Not going to change patterns. And we'll do add. We'll put in our header, our footer, group with a row. Come in here and make all this stuff ordered the way that we want it. Before I forget again, we will take this group and make that a main. And here on the row, we're going to start off by adding the title. And then below that, we're going to add another row. And that's going to hold our metadata. Let's come back in here and do blocks. Theme. All right, so what do I want here? I want to add the author name. Yeah, we'll do author name. And we'll do the modified date, categories, tags. I think that should do it. Grab all these guys here and pop them in the row. So let's just save that and take a peek at it on the front end. And we'll do a blog page and click on one of these guys. There we go. So now we can see we've got our title. We've got theme reviewer. That's the author name. This is our category and then our tags. And looking at this, we probably want to change this from a row. Instead of a row, we want to change that to a stack. And then we are going to, it should all be justified left, but Gutenberg is being Gutenberg. I'm going to come in and just add some prefixes here so that we know what's happening. Categories. And there we go. If I wanted to add, a prefix to author name, what I would do is I would create a row here. Let's just do it. So we'll create a row and we'll pop the author name in there. And then we'll add a paragraph, even though I don't really want it to be a paragraph element. That's what it's going to be for these purposes. And then we'll do the same thing down here. So we'll create a row. And say date colon. And I'll put my modified date in after it. Save and preview. And this is not showing a modified date because we imported this and it doesn't have a modified date. But if I edit the post, say update, and then view it again, it now has a modified date. If I had done creation date, it would have shown up right away. But the last thing that I want to do here is We've got our stack there. Is underneath that, I want to put another row. I guess this isn't the last thing, because in here I want to do content. That's going to add the contents of the post. And then yet another row. And this, I want to have our navigation. So for this, I want to have our previous post and our next post. And I want to make this space between. And that guy is going to be left aligned. And this one I want to have right aligned. So let's save that and preview. And there we have it. This post has a lot of stuff in there that looks funny because of the way these posts are. So if we do font size scale, this one's probably going to look a little bit better. So this is the title, of course, our meta, and then the body, then a previous and next. There, this has a previous and next. There we go, previous and next. So that takes care of our index template. It takes care of our single post template and our page template. And because we're using the same template right now for our page and our front page, we just have the one. Later on, we will probably create, let's just go ahead and we will create a different template for the front page right now, because the page template, I want to have a title, but the front page template, I don't. So we're going to come back here. If we look right now at our front page, we've got that thing that says front page. I don't want that. So we'll come back into edit site, the templates, and we'll go into pages. Because here, I just want to copy everything, copy blocks, and we'll create a new template for front page. So this time we'll just say front page, skibbity dippity, and paste those guys in there. And we're going to delete our title row. So now we have a front page that does not have a title, and we're also, when we get into styling, we're going to make this full width. And then other pages have titles. And of course, our blogs have titles. Okay, we are coming up on the finish line here, and there's really just a few more templates that we want to create. One is going to be an archive template. And the big difference between this and what we have in the index template is that the archive template is going to have an archive title. And that's going to show something like, category, colon, and the category name, or tag, colon, tag name. Same thing for, media or any other archives, authors, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to do that. And then after that, we're going to create one for our blog posts. And that's going to be home.php. We'll do one for our search page, and then we'll finish it off with a 404 page. So let's jump in now, and we're going to take that index template that we created, make a copy of it, and start working on the archive template. Back in our site editor, we'll come into templates, and we will hit our index template. Let's open this guy up, and instead of just copying all these and plopping them down into the other templates as is, we're going to be using this query loop an awful lot. So I want to make sure that any changes that I make to this query loop get reflected in all the different places that we're using it. So what I will do is I'm going to come in and click on the three dots here, and I want to create a template part for it. And I'm going to create that as a general template part, because we have the three different types that we can do: a general, header, and footer. And I want to call this query loop. And now you'll see inside that query loop template part, I can now reuse this over and over again. Any changes that I make to it in one place are going to get reflected everywhere else. So let's save this guy. And now that I've done that, I can come in and copy this template. So we're going to copy blocks. And we're going to go back to templates. And we're going to create an all archives template. And now I actually will select that pattern since it is exactly the same as before. The only difference now is that above this query loop, we're going to add another row. Here, let me just click on all this stuff to make them go away. All right, so above this, we're going to add another row with the title. And that title is not going to be just any old title. It's going to be an archive title. Why? Because WordPress has different functions for getting the archive title versus a page or post title versus a search title. And it makes creating templates a bit of a pain in the butt because you've got to account for whatever page you're on and pull the right kind of title. So here we go, archive name and then, or archive type and then name. So now let's save this. It is in H1, so that's good. Save that puppy. And we're going to come out and take a look at one of our categories. And here we go, 6.1. We're going to view this. There we go. So now we are viewing the archive template. I can see my archive title there. And I've got my query loop. So interesting thing that I can do here is if I edit site, I mentioned before how we made a template part for our query loop. Now I can come in and I can change one of these and it's going to change everywhere. So for example, I can take this title and I can tell it that I want it to be large, which I don't really, but for our purposes, I will. And now our archive title should be large, as well as any place else where we're using that. There we go. There's our blog. It's now using the large title. And if I open up one of our archives, it will also be using the large title. There it is. One thing that I think might be useful for you guys, and I'm just kind of shoving this in there. Let's come into plugins and install plugins. Not install plugins, I'm sorry, add new plugins. Is this Querymon. This is a fantastic tool when you are building a theme. Because it's got a great little guy in here that makes life very nice. I've got that installed and activated. And if I visit site, right in here, I can see information about the type of page that we're looking at. And I can see which template we're using. So very quickly, I can see that it's using that front page template. And it is a page, it is a singular, and it is a front page. Same thing if I come into blog page, I can see that it's using my index template, and I can see that it is the home page. One of these guys has categories. Here we go, this one has categories. So let's click on a category. Now I can see that we're on our category template, and there it is. I've got my archive template, and that's because it is an archive and it is a category. So Querymon, super helpful for all sorts of stuff, but especially for developing themes, just so that you can identify and troubleshoot your templates and just make sure that the right thing is running where it's supposed to be running. Anyway, that was a little bit of a distraction from what we were going to do, but we'll come back into our site editor now and just get back on track. So we've got our all archive template done. We'll come back to our hierarchy here. We've got archive, index, those are done. We've got our single, we've got our page done. Let's go ahead and do the home template. This is going to be for our blog. So we'll say add new template, and we'll choose blog home. We will start from our index template. And here, the only change that we're going to make is to add a row. And inside that row, I want to show you what happens when we just add a title. So we're just going to add title. And we're going to move this where it belongs. So save that guy. And preview this on the site. Now when we look at the blog page, I just chose title for the title. And so what that actually does is it takes the first thing inside of that post loop, which in this case is going to be that template sticky. And it's going to show that for the title. That's not what we want. So let's find out what we could use instead. Let's remove this one. What happens if we use archive title? Here we get nothing because the home page or the blog page actually is not an archive. It's a completely separate thing. So because of that, we need to remove it. And we're just going to manually create one. Because there is nothing that's going to show that page title of, in this case, I want to use the term articles. So I need to make that an H1. So there is nothing that would say blog or articles or whatever the name of the page is that holds your general blog page. There's no function out there that's going to get that for you. You just have to put it in. It's one of the quirky little things about WordPress that can be really frustrating until you understand what's happening. All right, so let's close this out. And then we're going to come in, and again, we're going to copy all this stuff. I don't even know why I bothered to copy because I'm just using the same pattern anyway. But we're going to go into templates. And this time I want to create a template for my search results. Actually, before I do that, let's come back because I want to show you what happens when we do a search right now. So if I search for lorem, because I know we've got lorem ipsum, it's just going to show me my index template because we do not have a template for the search result page, the one that is search. So let's come into edit site and create one of those. Template, search results. Start off with that little dude. And the big thing that we want to change here is to add a row with the search. Add that row with the search title. Reorder this stuff. See, some things about making a block theme actually are a lot quicker and easier than they are when you're doing it in PHP. If I was doing this in PHP, I'd have to, create all the HTML for everything, copy and paste it into PHP files, write all my functions. So this sort of stuff, this is easier. But there is a lot of other stuff that's very clunky, all the back and forth between what we're doing here inside the browser and what we have to do and what we're going to have to do with the file system, exporting files. Right now we have some stuff that lives in the file system, some stuff that lives in the database. It's all nebulous and it's not straightforward at all unless you really have a grasp of what's happening under the hood. But to even watch this stuff, you're like, what the hell's going on? Because there's just so much happening in so many different places. And because of that, I would actually say that block themes in a lot of ways are more complicated than classic themes. Classic themes are straightforward. It's just PHP. It's not hard stuff. But these block themes, you've got this mixture of PHP where you need it. You've got some stuff on the file system, some stuff in the database, some things happening in theme.json. You've got some things happening with blocks and React. And it's like, why do they complicate this the way that they did? But that's just my frustration with the Gutenberg project showing again. So anyway, now that I've digressed, let's go ahead and view this thing. And here we will search again for lorem. Now there we go. We've got a nice search title and you can see that we are using our search template. Cool. So what are we missing? All we're missing now is a 404 template. So if I were to come in here, for example, and say, no. We can see that it's pulling up my index template, but it is a 404 page type. So let's create our 404 template. And here we're going to come back to templates and we will add a new template and we will say page 404. And just because I don't feel like adding everything manually again, I'm just going to start off with this. And inside that group, we're just going to delete the query loop. Goodbye. And inside the meat of this page template, I'm going to change this row. I want to change that to stacked. And we're just going to add some stuff in there. I'm going to add a heading. That says 404 page not found. Try searching instead, and we'll add a search box. Now we've got the page template showing up. 404 page not found. Try searching instead. Search. Boom. Cool. So that is it. We've got all of our page templates done now. We could see that they're all showing up in the right places. And the next part is going to be to start styling them a little bit. This was definitely one of the longer and more complex parts of this series. So thank you very much for bearing with me. I hope you got something from this, and I will see you next time.